Good morning, Dan. I really appreciate you waking up and joining me today. How's your day off to? Start so far?
So far, so good.
Excellent. One of the things I miss most about just the current way of the world we're living in right now is traveling. And I specifically love visiting small towns. And in a past life, it's what it feels like right now, looking back on, the past few years, especially dealing with the pandemic. I took a lot of trips to small towns out in the Midwest, and I actually visited New Glarus twice. Normally, I'll only visit a small town once because you get the feel, you really enjoy it.
Yeah, right.
You pick another one the next time.
Spend a half
But
day and move on.
It had such an impact to me that I actually came to New Glarus 2 times as I was in your area, and it was an absolute blast. One of my memories is, I know you're going to have to correct me on the pronunciation of this, but it was the tavern downtown, not downtown, Old Town Tavern. Is it Pumples, or how do you say the name of that?
Yep, no, you're right. It's Pumples. So it's with an umlaut over the U. Yep.
I went there. I had a fantastic lunch, and I remember getting a dollar bill, wrapping a quarter in it, and trying to nail it to the ceiling.
Yeah. That's kind of a Wisconsin thing, I think. I've never seen it anywhere else.
Do you know what it comes from and why, there's just a game of trying to land a dollar on the ceiling?
I have no idea. Although I can tell you that once a year they get a ladder out, pull the money down, and make it a donation to the, local charity or the fire department or whatever. So I think it's something that's always been done, and I'm not certain where it came from.
Well, it was definitely a good time, and it was definitely a good time when I had a spotted cow in my hand, just trying to get tax on the ceiling.
Yeah.
How many over the years have you had the opportunity to successfully land on that ceiling?
I've done it a couple of times, but it does take practice. You're better with a 50-cent piece, something heavier.
Yeah, I'll have to start carrying them in my pocket for next time I'm up that way. I'll have to keep my eyes open now. Yeah. I was lucky enough that when I was there was barely anybody else in the business, so it didn't matter if I had a bad miss and it fell on the ground somewhere. But I can't imagine doing it when you have a packed tap room.
Nobody cares, though. Everybody else is in the same boat, so it's not a big deal.
Awesome. Well, speaking of Wisconsin and Wisconsin things, where are you from originally?
I'm a San Franciscan. I grew up in the city of San Francisco.
Not Wisconsin at all.
No.
But we'll get to later how you ended up there. But, what is your favorite thing? You've been in Wisconsin, 30 years now, give or take?
Yeah, pretty much, almost.
So besides throwing, coins at the ceiling, what do you love best about the area you live in? And what's your favorite part of, just being in Wisconsin?
Well, I grew up, I was born in 1960 in San Francisco. So San Francisco in the 60s and early 70s was a wonderful place to be. San Francisco was a small city. It's more or less 7 miles by 7 miles. So it's a little, it was at that time kind of a charming place to grow up. And it was a, time of optimism and, but it's different now. And Wisconsin particularly Madison, Wisconsin, which they call the People's Republic of Madison, I really like. It's a small city. It has that same vibe, optimistic vibe that was in the old days in the city of San Francisco. But Wisconsin, I like because it has 4 seasons. So we have beautiful falls with the leaves changing. Winter is with huge snowflakes coming down. It's beautiful on a quiet winter day. Summer can be hot and humid, which I'm not a fan of. But having the 4 seasons, and also the people here are very, very friendly. There's a Wisconsin or a Midwestern work ethic and kind of live and let live attitude. People are polite. People in traffic driving are polite. So it's very comfortable. There's not much stress, being from California, traffic and rush hour and things like that it's so claustrophobic that people sometimes get a little bit manic. Here, it's mostly very relaxed. And so I enjoy that. I enjoy the peace of it.
I can definitely understand that. I think one of my favorite things during my visit up to your area was I think I lost cell phone signal. And anytime I can intentionally or unintentionally disconnect, it's nice to just feel like you're one with like nature and the community you're spending time in.
People sometimes have a lot of anxiety when they come to visit, particularly people from Europe when they come here, because they have no signal, and you have to kind of drive up on a hill and stand with one leg in the air with your phone up in the air to get a signal, which I've seen that in places like Vermont and New Hampshire, but that's okay. We don't always need to be tied into the world.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think the last year has given us a really great opportunity to disconnect even further and just spend more time on yourself versus the rest of the world. How have you and your wife, Deb, spent the pandemic?
Well, it's been stressful, obviously, for everybody. Like everywhere in the country, in Wisconsin, taverns pretty much closed. So that meant we sell about 40% of our beer on draft. So that meant, and we dumped a bunch of kegs because there we were with the kegs, and we were gearing up for summer. So how do you do that? That was a lot of work. Plus the angst of our business partners, all of our tavern owners, which are our friends, was uncomfortable. All of those people out of work. We decided that we weren't going to lay anybody off. We closed our gift shop. So we didn't allow anybody into the brewery. So the people that worked in the gift shop transitioned over to being brewers. So we had gift shop workers working in the brew house, working on the bottling line, so that we could keep them employed. And nobody really knew what was going to happen. I think we all had a feeling of, is this going to be really bad? Is it going to be like 1918, or is it going to be nothing? We had no idea. So what we did is we took our brewing, we took our crew and we split them into 3 teams. So you basically worked for a week and then you had 2 weeks off, so that if things just really went downhill in a hurry, and people started to get sick, we could isolate a team and still have 2 teams. And then if one other team got sick, we'd still have 1 team. We could keep brewing. And then we paid people to stay home, which was expensive, but we have really wonderful employees, and we're all in this together. We sink or swim together. So we felt like it was worthwhile to pay them so that we didn't lose them. And the other thing is, we didn't take any PPE or any money from the government. We figured we should make it on our own. Luckily, some people did get COVID, but we had no severe illnesses. My biggest fear was somebody's grandmother or grandfather would get it from me or somebody in the brewery and then die. And that scared the hell out of me, because that's not something that any of us want to happen. So that was stressful. And then the last thing was, the politics of the whole situation was absolutely ridiculous. And since we're in a rural area and there are people with differing political views, differing world views, so wearing masks and understanding the need for social distancing, so people didn't go out and gather with other people to try to coax our people who are maybe a little bit more cavalier in their views to buy into this was not so easy. And then the same thing with getting vaccinated. We're about 85 or 90% vaccinated. There's a few people who are pregnant who are opting out, but most people have been patient with our views and worked with us. So I would say we were very lucky.
No, that's great to hear. And you put all the politics issues very tactfully the way you put that across just now. So good job handling that. And I want to touch on one thing you just said too. Just, I had the guilt as well, or the thought of guilt of only imagining if I had given someone COVID. Luckily, I never had COVID. None of my family was either, immediately affected by it, but I can only imagine the thoughts of that. And I think that fear kind of pushed me to just continue being safer through all of this and, isolating a little bit more just to get through it together.
That's how I sold it to the young men in the brewery. I said, you're if you get this, you might not even know it, But you need to cowboy up. You need to be a good soldier and protect your grandparents. And I think people could identify, particularly young people, could identify with that, because otherwise, we got people that got COVID and didn't even really know it until they were tested. So it's a strange situation.
Agreed. Do you feel things are starting to get better in the New Glarus area and Wisconsin as a whole?
Yeah, the state is approaching 50% fully vaccinated. So I think we've been fairly good in that way. The frequency of disease is 300 people a day are catching it, and 3 or 4 people a day are dying, which is much it's whatever 100 times or more better. So I think things are starting to get better. The taverns are starting to open back up. We've had recently, our last couple of months have been our highest sales ever. We were down 12% in 2020, but I think this year we'll probably, even though January, February, and March were slow, I think we'll probably be up our biggest year ever, I guess, unless things change. There's a lot going on.
People are craving human interaction right now, and I think places that serve alcohol are going to be very hot places in the coming months.
Yeah. And the other thing that's happening is people are moving towards something familiar. So they're drinking our beers. They know our beers. In 2019, of course, there was more or less a brewery opening every week or every day, a lot of tap rooms. So there was, a lot of competition. So if there's 100 tap rooms open and they're all selling 500 or 1,000 barrels of beer, that's competition. But now I think people are maybe drinking more at home, and they're sticking with things that are familiar. And I would imagine that's why we're seeing a uptick in sales.
And how has it changed your drinking habits over the past year?
We didn't, for about a year, we really could not go to bars and restaurants. But what was nice is a lot of places some places had outdoor dining. So, we'd go out on a Friday night and have a pint or two with, in Wisconsin, fish fry is really big. So it didn't really change too much for me. I'm pretty much old school in how I drink.
Drinking the cold of winter, even in outdoors in Wisconsin.
Oh, no. We didn't. No, that would have been in the summertime. By the time the winter came, I'd have just beer with dinner, or a glass of wine, or maybe a bourbon after dinner or something like that.
I was going to say, you're quite a brave man if you're outdoors in the Wisconsin cold enjoying a pint.
No, it can be a little bit chilly. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, what a weird year it's been, but I want to kind of go way back for you. You've been in the brewing industry since you were, 20 years old, but I want to start even before that. When you were a kid just growing up in San Francisco, and your teacher asked you, hey, Daniel, what do you want to be when you grow up? What was the answer you gave back then?
Well, when I was in grammar school, I almost did become a firefighter. That was my main goal. That's a long story, but I was almost became a firefighter in the city of San Francisco. Or the other thing that I really dreamed about was being a forest ranger in a national park.
And did you ever decide to potentially pursue those careers, or at what point did you decide you wanted to just be in the beer industry?
Well, when I was in college, I worked as a firefighter for the city of Davis. I went to school at UC Davis, and so I very much enjoyed being a firefighter. My father was a medic in the Army, and then an ambulance driver for the city of San Francisco, and my mother was a nurse. So I come from a long line of service, I guess. So, but I studied food science when I was in UC Davis, with the emphasis in malting, brewing, dairy science, and viticulture, but mostly brewing. Brewing was something that was magical to me, like alchemy as a marriage of science and art. It's like being a chef and an engineer, because on one hand you're cooking, on the other hand you're calculating, you're using a calculator and doing engineering. And I like that Renaissance idea. And I think I was always into outdoor activities. I was into rock climbing, running. I was ran miler. So nutrition was always important to me. And that's kind of why I started studying nutrition. But brewing just kind of grew on me as a fascinating science. And I took the examination to be a firefighter in San Francisco. And I don't know, there was like thousands of people took the exam, but I think I ended up being like 5 on the list. And so my father was very excited because, you know, once you get a job with the fire department in the city of San Francisco, you're set for life. But they ended up throwing out the test because they said that it was the way that they ran the test was racist and sexist. So they basically said, we're going to get rid of it and start all over again. So instead of getting offered a job, was taken off. So then I became a brewer.
Interesting. And I have to go back to one point you made. You said you were a miler. What was your fastest mile when you're racing days?
I was not that, you know, right now I'm actually pretty good. I'm 61 years old and my best time is 6:08, but I got a new pair of Nikes and I'm going to, this summer, I'm going to get below 6. But when I was in high school, amazing. I think I was mediocre. I ran a 5:08, I think was my best time.
That's not bad. I was a lot like you when I was in high school. I really enjoyed running, but I was not the fastest guy on the team. I just liked the feeling of being out there in fresh air. I honestly didn't love just running circles around a track. I enjoyed just running in nature. But there's something special about you just being out there running, clearing your mind. You know, 100%. What do you do these days to clear your mind? Obviously, you're a runner, but you know, what do you like to do to simply just disconnect?
A run. I mean, running is, like you said, it's like being 6 years old again. When you watch little kids, little boys running and running and running. Running to me is that feeling. Just it's meditative, it's rhythmic, it's the sound, the pounding of the pavement, or not pounding, but the sound of your feet, the rhythm, your breathing. It's I love to get home at night and go for a run, or a long run on a Sunday. Is a magical thing where you can be alone for an hour and a half or 2 hours and just, you know, be out in nature. Especially, like you say, like if you're on a trail in the woods among the trees. You know, the trees when they're over the trails, it's like running in a cathedral.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. Just getaways where you get to go be one with nature is the absolute best. And I look forward to having them before too long.
Yeah.
But in your 20s, you were working in the beer industry. Was it your goal while you were working for others to someday open up your own?
No, no, not at all. I am not an entrepreneur. I'm a scientist and an engineer by temperament. I view the world that way. The philosophy, or what I would call the religion of science, and that is the antithesis of entrepreneurialism. Because to me, a scientist or an engineer deals with facts, what they can see in front of them, whereas entrepreneurs can conjure in their imagination unseen things and make them happen. And that's not me. I was working for Anheuser-Busch as a supervisor in the finishing department, and I was not really a corporate brewer either. My heart is in small breweries. I think my perfect job would be brewmaster in a 10 barrel brew pub. But
so if anybody's hiring, shoot Dan an email. He's looking for a 10 barrel brew pub to come work at.
Right. But what had happened was I was really not happy working rotating shifts at a large brewery, a multi-million barrel brewery. And my wife is very, very, very much an entrepreneur, 100% of that mindset. And she's a very, very good leader. I always say that she is like like a really good first lieutenant, in the sense that most of us, when the bullets start to fly, we panic. Our mind becomes clouded. She's the exact opposite. When things get heavy and hot and heavy, her mind becomes laser focused. So she's a great business person. And she said, we were living in Colorado. I was working for Anheuser-Busch, and she said, you're really not happy here. And she hated Colorado for a lot of reasons. And she said, I want to go home. I'm from Wisconsin. She's from Wisconsin. She said, I want to go home to Wisconsin because it's comfortable. It's what I know, and I fit there. So let's pack up. I will raise the money. I will manage the getting loans and investors, and you build the brewery. So my engineering skills and brewing skills and detailed temperament and her ability to run a business and manage a business worked really well together. So we made a really good team, and we sold our house and packed up and moved to Wisconsin. I'd been to Wisconsin to visit her family, but I never lived here. So we came and basically bought an old warehouse and just kind of started.
That's fascinating. One article I read made it sound like Debs raised the money as a gift to you, which is absolutely a really great love story there. But you were aware she was doing it. It wasn't a complete surprise. Like, hey, Dan, here's X amount of dollars. Here's your brewery.
No, we wrote the business plan together. She wrote the majority of the business plan, but I wrote the brewing parts of it. But yeah, it took us, I don't know, about 6 months to write a business plan and raise money. And, but no, she was definitely 100% the one that pushed it. And it was simply because she wanted to get me out of the corporate grind. And she felt like I could be successful if I was put into this type of situation. But when we started the brewery in 1993, I think we sold 199 barrels the first year. And now this year we'll do, 250,000 barrels ish, something like that. So I thought when we got to 8,000 barrels, that was huge. I never ever imagined that we would be running a huge brewery.
And only in Wisconsin. We'll dive into that shortly, which is even more impressive.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what your wife did, and it's amazing how well you two work together. My wife helps me a lot in my endeavors, and there's lots of challenges when you work with that significant other in your life. 100%. But before we kind of dive into that interpersonal relationship, what was it like getting accustomed to living in Wisconsin?
We got here in July, and it was, it was like about 800 degrees and 300% humidity. It was like being under boiling water. And I was shocked because we didn't really have any money in those days. We didn't have any air conditioning, and the house was like freaking living in a furnace. It would have been a great place to proof bread. And I was just absolutely shocked. The first night we were unloading our furniture into the house, and I was just sweating. And then all of a sudden this big typical Wisconsin afternoon storm front comes in. This big clouds come in, and I think, oh, finally, because where I'm from, when it rains, it cools down, and the rain came in, and lightning, and it just deluge of rain, and I thought, oh, finally, thank God, it's going to cool off. And then the clouds passed, and it was just the freaking asphalt was steaming, and so it took me a while to get acclimated, because in San Francisco, it's more or less 68 degrees Fahrenheit all year round, except in the summer when it gets cold. But that took me a while to get used to it. And the other thing is the language in California. When people want you to F off, they say, they give you the finger and they say F off. In Wisconsin, they say have a nice day. So it took me a while. It took me a while to learn Wisconsin speak because. So
was everyone just telling you have a nice day when you first got there until you got accepted in the community?
No. Actually, we when we moved into Wisconsin, a local tavern, the first night, a local tavern had pizza delivered because it's a small town. They knew that we were coming, but people didn't really know who we were, and we bought an old warehouse in town, and we started working, and people saw that we were real in the sense that we worked harder and longer than anybody. I mean, I was there at sunup, and I was working 20-hour days. We had no choice because we didn't really have any money, and it had to work. If it didn't work, then we were going to be living in our car. So, there's nothing like fear that will motivate somebody to get their ass out of bed and go to work. So the locals saw that. This is a very conservative, it's mainly Swiss people in this town, and they're, notoriously, shall we say, frugal and suspicious. Has to do with, in Switzerland, I'm told, with the steep mountains and the valleys, that people don't like outsiders. So it took a while for them to accept us, but they watched us, and they saw that we weren't, fast talking carpetbaggers.
That's funny. So what was the craft beer scene like in Wisconsin at this point in time? And, what was the common person in New Glarus drinking on their Friday night?
When we we went to an auction. Deb bought a brewery at a foreclosure auction, and so I needed some help to move it to the site. So I went to the local tavern and hired some local farmers to come and help me. And one of them had a flatbed trailer, so we were able to do it together. And the first day, one of them said to me, "So you're going to start a brewery? What's your beer going to taste like?" So I tried to, explain a Pilsner and a Bock beer, blah, blah, blah. He said, no. Is it going to taste like Bud, Miller, or Coors? Because I can't drink Bud because it gives me a headache. So that was, he wanted to know whether it was going to be like, what's the difference? At that point, the big beer in Wisconsin was Miller Lite. Every tavern had, 2 or 3 draft lines. And this is a Miller country, and Bud really had no inroads here. So you might have Miller Lite and regular Miller, and maybe Sprecher Amber or Capital Amber. So an amber lager was pretty out in left field at that time. So it was not. This was way before the idea of IPAs and things like that.
So one of my favorite things about craft beer is just the educational side of it. So you went into a place where everybody was drinking Miller, launching a brewery to make these styles you were passionate about. How did you best educate the locals on the quality of beer, you were making?
I don't really think of it that way. I'm more, I like beers like, given the choice, I would drink a Helles, or if it's not, if I'm in Germany and they have bottled Pilsner or draft Helles, I will drink a draft Helles. If I can find a fresh Pils, or if very rarely a Pilsner on draft, I'll definitely drink that. So those are the types of beers that I like. So a move from Miller and Bud and Coors to a Helles is not that big of a leap. So we started out with a beer called Edelpils, which was it wasn't that crazy. It was like 25 IBUs, 12 degrees Plato beer. So it was familiar to people. So that was really never. I'm not a campaigner. I'm not trying to change the world. I'm not trying to. I think it's naive and arrogant when craft brewers try to lecture beer people about why their beer is good. I mean, there's a Lambic beer in Brussels that I go to from time to time, and our beer is the best beer in the world. And I always get a kick out of that because they sell like 250 barrels around the world. But be that as it may, my point is simply that I let people tell me what they want. And so we made lots of beers, lots of brands, and let people decide.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we let people tell us, and we adapted to what works for them.
Now, did you have much competition in the 90s in Wisconsin, or were you like the new kid on the block and everybody was excited to try?
No, a lot of competition. Wisconsin is a Germanic area, so beer is important culturally. As I said, Miller was big, but also we had Sprecher was doing great, and Capital, Kirby Nelson, great brewer, was making great beer. So, but probably our biggest competition was Leinenkugel's, which was bought by Miller. And so Miller has always been tough for us. They don't like us. They don't like us in the state, and they push pretty hard against us. We've had some. We get along great with the brewers. Brewers are wonderful, but the marketing and salespeople is brutal. You know, people don't understand that the beer business, particularly marketing and sales, like water polo. All you see is heads bobbing above the water, but underneath it's a freaking knife fight. The sale of beer in taverns, particularly draft beer, it's pretty nasty. So it's still to this day we go to war loaded for bear because they're nasty.
Oh my gosh, that sounds intense. And it's interesting looking at your success in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's the only place you're distributed. One of your best-selling beers, Spotted Cow, you promote it as a naturally cloudy farmhouse ale, and that is your best-selling beer, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that's so interesting to me because that's not a style, one, many breweries lead with, but two, in an area where you're talking about the average drinker enjoying Miller. How did you get them to appreciate that style, and why do you think Spotted Cow received the acclaim it does?
Well, again, as I said, we don't really we don't push. We get pulled by our customers. So we've made well over 200 different styles of beer, and each one of those beers is made with the same thought and passion and hope as the next one. And you never know what's going to take and what's not going to take. Spotted Cow was just one of many, many beers. We had gone to an open air museum where you walk around and you look at different homesteads, frontier farms. And, there was Norwegian and Yankee and African American and German and Polish. And you'd walk around through the woods and you'd come across these farms, and there'd be people dressed in period costumes working the farms. Maybe they'd be cooking, or they'd be harvesting or planting or whatever. And they talk to you about what life was like particularly in the German farm in 1850s for recent immigrants. And in their root cellar, they had a crock pot of fermenting beer. And I thought, oh, that's really fascinating. I wonder what beer would have been like in 1850 in the Wisconsin frontier. And I thought, well, of course, it's unfiltered. If the farmer was affluent, maybe he'd be using really nice Czech Bohemian hops. And I kind of conjured this idea of what this beer would taste like. And I said, okay, well, this is a Wisconsin farmhouse ale, because I'm the pedantic beer geeks freaked out, because to them that meant, a beer from Belgium. And so I didn't really try not to let that bother me. But we made this beer just like every other beer. And the best way to describe it is we don't really do any marketing. So we have rows of beer in the warehouse on pallets. And when the row was going down, we make more beer. And some beers sell faster than others. Spotted Cow just sold. Why did it sell? I really don't know. I can say that it's an ale. It's fruity. It's easy drinking. It has an intense fruitiness. And I think that it's just very familiar and thirst quenching. And I think it just suits the Wisconsin temperament.
It's absolutely become a Wisconsin staple. And to look at your beer line even further, I mean, so many breweries these days rely on IPA for a bulk of their sales. You don't have one in your year-round repertoire. Is that something you've intentionally avoided doing, or why haven't you just thought about putting an IPA in the main line?
Deb didn't want to. We do have a dry hop pale ale, And we do make a double IPA from time to time, but we don't have a traditional IPA, and number one, because everybody else is doing that. So we as business people, if everybody is going to the left, we're going to go to the right, because that's where the opportunity is. And there's so many good IPAs floating around. Why fight that fight? We might as well do our own thing.
Now you set me up for this.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
Our number 2 selling beer is a dry hopped pale ale. So it's like 30 IBUs. It's got about a pound of hops per barrel. It's 5% alcohol. So it's not an IPA, it's a pale ale, but it kind of is close to that genre. And that's our number 2 selling beer, called Moon Man.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And you kind of set me up for this question. You said when everybody else goes left, you go right. Of course, any business can't always have 100% winners. Have there ever been any beers you were super passionate about that you put out to the public that just didn't take the way you thought?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we some years ago, I was studying, an Englishman by the name of Wheeler had written about the history of porters in England. And Rodenbach, Grand Cru, is basically a descendant of the original porters. Of course, when England ruled the world and during the Industrial Revolution, all the brewers from the continent went and studied English brewing. And so porters were basically a mixture of a sour and as everybody knows, old stale beer, sour beer, and fresh beer. And so I made this stout, this porter, dark, rich, beautiful foam, a little bit acetic, a little bit lactic, really thirst quenching. And it was on draft in town, and I just used to love to drink it by the pint because to me, it was absolutely a perfect beer. But it was really young in the brewery, and in our naivete, we called it Old English Porter, which is correct, really, because it's the way porters used to be, at least according to Wheeler. But people just lost it. They were, oh my God, this is, Old English Porter, I was thinking Tadcaster Porter, and this beer is spoiled. Dude, you need to recall it. We were making sour beers in 1993. And in those days, people did not understand. Now everybody's making these kettle soured beers, but in 1993, a sour beer people would freak. Panicked. Oh my God, dude, this beer is awful. Whereas it was kind of depressing to me because the beer was spectacular. So we recalled it from the marketplace, brought all the beer back, and we sold it out of our gift shop. And we put a big sign on it that's with a guy holding his hand saying, "Stop, do not buy this beer. It's sour. It's supposed to be sour." And we kind of sold it that way. And the beer sold through really, really quickly. So the lesson is we had to do a better job of communicating what we were making. And people are generally pretty kind if they understand what you're trying to do. But if they don't, it can be bad.
Yeah, the messaging component is absolutely important. Have you gone back and rebrewed that beer over the years?
No. I got PTS from that one, so no.
I'm not going to ask any more questions about that one, Dan.
Well, we've made lots of sour brown ales, though. We've made lots of beers in the Flanders style sour brown. We do that pretty regularly, but not this.
Well, and you make Serendipity, which is one of your more popular beers, and you advertise Serendipity as a hoppy accident fruit ale. What's the story behind that? Why do you call it a hoppy accident?
Happy accident.
Happy accident. Oh, I apologize.
And that's of course what serendipity means. What
yes.
we at that point we were making Belgian Red, which is a sour brown beer with cherries. And I was new to the business and I didn't really understand how the world of fruit worked. So we had contracts for fruit every year, and that spring there was a repeated frost, and if you know that probably everybody knows that when the fruit's blossoming and it frosts, the blossoms die, and then the warm weather comes and it blossoms again. And it did that 3 times. So effectively, the crop was 100% ruined. And I think people don't really realize how vulnerable agriculture is to weather events, and that's why things like climate change are and the destruction of native species like bees is. We live in a very, very fragile world. But in any event, I called up and said, okay, I'm ready for my fruit. We don't have any. What do you mean you don't have any? Did you sell it to somebody else? No, the crop, 100% failure. We were able to get a little bit of fruit. And so Debs said, well, can you come up with something else? Well, I was able to find apples, and I was able to find other fruit and put together a blend of kind of remnants and dogs and cats and come up with a beer, and it actually tasted really, really good. So that was Serendipity.
And for that beer, was it strictly Wisconsin fruit in it?
Yeah. We use Oregon red raspberries in our raspberry beer, but we try Wisconsin's a cranberry state, and there are some apples from time to time. In years when we need to, we used to get apples out of Michigan, but not anymore. Yakima is probably where we go to if we have problems. But cherries right now are only Door County, Wisconsin cherries, and our apples also from Wisconsin.
And obviously, it's important to support local, but why did you initially make that decision to use primarily Wisconsin-based ingredients?
I think since we're a Wisconsin-only brewery, keeping the money in state, farming's under a lot of stress, especially small family farms are not doing well. The suicide rate among farmers is equal to the suicide rate as war veterans. So there's a lot of stress. So the idea of paying forward was important. The morality of business, also knowing your suppliers is important. So being able to go out into a field and walk around, look at the cherries on the trees, talk to the farmer, find out what they're using, what they're doing, what their inputs are, and is important. And it just is a convenient and correct.
No, that's amazing. It's always nice to speak to a business owner who has more of a mission behind their business, whether it's supporting locals, supporting the farmers. That statistic you just shared is mind-blowing. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. Well, most farmers are in their 50s and 60s, and so they're starting to retire, and their children saw how hard they worked their whole life, and they didn't really make any money. Farming kind of went to hell in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and so farmers don't really, in Wisconsin at least, I can't speak for other areas, it's kind of a hand to mouth. Most have a spouse that work. So really there's the whole generation of institutional memory that's lost. So you have these older people, and then now we have younger, optimistic married couples coming into the business. So there's a sense that things may survive, but it's not an easy thing.
Sounds tough. Have you, as a brewery, taken any initiatives to get more involved in helping the farming community in Wisconsin besides purchasing their products?
I'm involved on advisory board for value-added agriculture in the state. We contract for as much hops in the state as we can. Barley's tough in Wisconsin, although we keep trying. Yeah, and the other thing we do is we pay a premium. So we're probably the number one user of Wisconsin hops. So I understand that if somebody has half an acre or 1 acre or not more than 5 acres in the state, a typical farm is probably 1 acre, that we'll pay them a premium above what other people will. And this is a business decision because they need to make money, because if they make money, they're not going to cut corners. And also then they'll listen to me about what varieties I want, how I want them to grow, how I want them to dry, how I want them to process. how I want them to bail. So it makes me kind of a big dog in their world, and they'll grow what I need.
Well, you're in the relationships business, and I think it goes a long way, the bond you can build with everyone in the supply chain related to your brewery. That's amazing what you've been able to build.
You know, Andrew, you said it exactly 100% right. I'm in the relationship business. That when I graduated from brewing school, it took me years. I thought that brewing was about machinery and recipes and formulas and spreadsheets, but really it's not. It's about people. Like Deb always says, people make beer, not machinery. You can have the best machinery in the world, but if you have bad people, you're going to make bad beer. If you have mediocre or compromised machinery but good people, you're going to make good beer. And so whether you're talking about the supply chain, whether it's bottles or cans or barley or hops, or and by the way, all of our glass and cans and cardboard comes from Wisconsin. But you're right, it's about people.
And one of my favorite sayings to just share is people like to spend money with people that they like. It's just so simple, but we like to drink with people we like to spend time around. It's common sense, but when you can build those relationships, it just makes everyone's experience better. But now I'd like to turn on possibly the most important relationship in your life with your wife, Deb, who you've been in business with about 30 years now.
Yeah.
You know, it can't all be smooth sailing, but I commend you for running a business with your wife. You know, what's it like, running a business with Deb? I mean, she was the first female founder, operator of a brewery in the United States, and she's a leading voice in craft beer like yourself. But what's it like running a business with your wife that's been around for so long?
As I said, she's a very much an entrepreneur. She's, on one hand, she's very soft and feminine, but on the other hand, she's tough, meaning that when she needs to fight, she'll fight. I think we're both type A personalities. We're both perfectionists. We're both hard driving people. So the only way that we could make, and it's not easy for sure. I would be lying if I said it was. The only way to make it work is complete trust and division of responsibility. So I'm in charge of brewing. I'm in charge of raw material procurement. I'm in charge of getting the beer made. I'm in charge of machinery. All of decisions related to quality control, et cetera, are under my domain. And she runs the business end, whether it's dealing with wholesalers, with bankers, human resources, all of those ends. And so we advise each other. Like, she's a really great taster. She's a much better taster than I am. So that I'll have her taste a beer and get her opinion, and we'll tweak based on what she tells me. But the secret is this complete division of labor and respect, so that I'm the final decider. And if you disagree with my decision, speak up. You can tell me why you disagree, but I make the final decision. And then you have to have trust and make peace with that. And so you can't do any of that "I told you so" type stuff. So passive aggressive behavior or anger or poor communication are caustic. You have to be honest.
How do you separate your two relationships, your working relationship versus your personal relationship? Do you force yourself to clock out when you're at home, or how do you put the divider between, all your interactions together? That way you can actually have a little time to not think about the business.
It's not so easy. It's difficult. I would say that when we eat breakfast together in the morning, which we always try to eat together, breakfast and dinner. Our breakfast, oftentimes, not always, but I would say 2 or 3 times a week, more or less, is a meeting about what we're going to do, or what problems we have, or what issues we have to deal with. And then if it gets too stressful, we'll say, let's clock out. So then it has to be a mindful activity. Living, like Oprah says, living mindfully is something that everybody needs to be living deliberately. That knowing how you feel, knowing what you're thinking, knowing what your buttons are, knowing what your stress is, and knowing when to let go, and also not to take things personally. Sometimes it's easy to, what do you mean by that, and get weird. So I think it's taken us a lot of years to make peace. I would not recommend it. I would not recommend being in business with your spouse because it's really, really difficult. The benefit is that when people are in business with their friends, that's even worse because you don't have the emotional stick-to-itiveness. You don't have to make it work. And oftentimes I see friends fall out. But if you trust your spouse, you should trust your spouse. And if you trust your business partner, emphatically, things can work well. And we're so different, and our work is divided between us. The division of labor is very strong that we're able to be very, very successful. But again, it's been like any type of endeavor. You have to invest, like learning a language, or you have to study and work at it and think about it. It just doesn't happen. It's not luck. It's not luck.
That's fantastic advice there. So when you and Deb clock out, are there any activities you like to do together?
Well, on Friday night, we usually go out to dinner. We like to go for walks, in the woods near our house. We sometimes we kind of just sit together and discuss what's going on in the world, try to make sense of the political chaos. She's heavily involved in politics and Facebook, and I'm not. So we talk about why do you think, like even this morning, I asked Deb, I said, why the hell would somebody say the requirement to wear a mask is like the Holocaust? Why would you say that? What the hell would you be thinking? Is that, are you an idiot, or are you being deliberate? Are you smart and messing with people, or are you just plain lack empathy and are stupid? And so those are the kind of things we talk about.
Fun conversations, it sounds like.
Maybe not.
Well, to change the subject on you, I love how much you've built relationships with your local community, the farmers in your state, just the people of Wisconsin as a whole, and you've made it your choice just to stick to distribution in your home state. And one thing that I also love is how you launched an employee stock ownership program. I know that's not directly related to the brew house, but why was that important to you to launch that program at New Glarus?
The employee stock option? Because we're both 61 years old, and we have to think about an end game. Where are we going to be? We did not want to sell the brewery to venture capitalists. We didn't want. The brewery is very much tied to the community. It's a wealth generator for the community, and we're somewhat ironically socialist in our bent. It's another story, but which is kind of weird for people that are principals in a business. But we felt like we didn't want to sell out and then have the money extracted by venture capitalists. We didn't want to be owned by another brewery, again, because we would devalue our identity. Our two daughters, like I said about the children of farmers, we didn't want them to run the brewery because it's tough. Running a brewery is not easy. And so Deb thought, well, I have all of these wonderful employees that have been with us for 10, 25 years. They've put a lot of effort into this, building this brewery. So let's sell the brewery to our employees. And so that's sort of our end game, so that hopefully the culture will remain. The New Glarus community, the New Glarus brewing community will not change. We don't think in terms of the next 3 months. We don't think in terms of the next year. I was an apprentice brewer in Germany, and it was interesting to me how European brewers think in terms of decades and centuries. We'd like this brewery to be around for hundreds of years, we don't think in terms of weeks or months or decades. So it seemed to be the most vision.
No, I love it. And, you mentioned the term in-game, and it's not putting a date to that, but once you and Deb decide to step away from daily operations, what are your goals in your life together? I mean, obviously more political conversations on Friday nights after a few beers, but what else do you want to do? Do you want to travel? Do you want to, launch any other businesses?
Yeah, no. As I said, I'm not an entrepreneur, and
she might drag you into it. She might buy you something and say, "Hey, Dan, we're doing this now."
Well, that's true, but we're both tired, and we know business is hard. Business is not for the faint of heart. I love to travel, and I'd love to do more of that when COVID's over. We have a cabin up north along Lake Michigan, so going up there is what we mostly do, because it's beautiful country. It's rural, lots of forests and water activity. So we'll go hang out in Door County and read, go for runs, go for walks, go for bike rides, relax.
For someone who enjoys such the simple things in life, you've built quite a business over the past 30 years. That's extremely impressive.
Well, thank you.
And looking back over your time in beer, what's one of your proudest moments that you look back on and you want that to define what you've accomplished?
My goal was to make world-class beer, and I still want to make the best beer that I can. But that's a vain goal, and vanity doesn't serve. And secondly, what is world-class beer? That it depends on who you ask. And no matter what you make, no matter what you do, there's somebody on ratebeer.com or whatever that doesn't like it. So you never are going to, that's a goal that's fleeting and difficult. So I realized that as I said, it's all about the people. So probably my proudest thing is when our employees, young employees, start out, maybe they graduate high school, they come to work for us, they get married, they buy a house, they have children. So we're having a freaking huge baby boom. The amount of people that are out right now for maternity or paternity leave it's kind of fun. So, but I'm proud that we can, people can afford to pay for houses and cars and families, and they have proper health insurance. They have a secure job. They can send their children to university. To me, that is, in the end, that's all that matters.
I can only imagine how proud that makes you. That's amazing, just how much you give back and just the mission behind New Glarus. I think our conversation today is, inspiring on so many levels, on the entrepreneurial level, on the brewing level, on just the level of building those relationships. I mean, in a world right now when so many breweries want to see their beer spread out coast to coast, you've shown how just loving your community can result in happiness. And Dan, I really appreciate you sharing and hanging out with me for the past hour. This has been a great conversation. So thanks again. And I look forward to visiting New Glarus again, sharing a beer. And I look forward to you taking that lake vacation before too long.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate your interest.
No, you as well. It's a fantastic time to hear from you. So thanks again, Dan, and see you soon. Cheers.
Okay. Cheers. Thank you.